everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel we're going to be counting down the top 10 Martin Scorsese films of all time. So we're taking a slight detour from spooky season to talk a little bit about Marty Scorsese. He's got a new film coming out this week, The Killers of the Flower Moon, which I'll have my review out for tomorrow. But today we're going to tackle the task of counting down his top 10 films of all time. And one thing that Martin Scorsese is competing for nowadays, and it's the only thing he's competing for, is he or is he not the greatest director of all time? He can make a great case for it. He's had a classic film come out every single decade since the 1970s. Since Mean Streets came out, he has been on the map as one of the best directors to do it, and right now he just continues to work and continues to put out classic film after classic film. To think that he put out The Irishman only a few years ago, which is again considered one of his best films he's ever made, and at his age, it is absolutely astonishing. And we're only going to be counting down his top 10 films because Martin Scorsese has also made so many great documentaries, including The Last Waltz, which would definitely make this top 10 list. He's also put out a bunch of short films, a bunch of short documentaries, including a great one about his parents, which I just absolutely love. He directed the Michael Jackson music video Bad. So Martin Scorsese can really just do it all, and the thing I love most about him and what I admire most about him is that he is a film fan at heart. That's what he loves. He's wearing it on his shoulder. He tells you exactly what he loves. He talks to you about going to the movies, seeing movies in movies. He still does reviews himself of film. So you know that the guy at his core is just a film fan like all of us. And yes, Martin Scorsese used to be my favorite director of all time. He's kind of falling to number 2 right now behind Quentin Tarantino, just because a kid of the 90s, Quentin Tarantino kind of got me into film, but Martin Scorsese is probably the greatest to ever do it. The consistency of his films, yes, he has some misses, like Stanley Kubrick, you could argue doesn't have a bad film in the bunch, but Martin Scorsese, he puts out a lot of movies. Not to the level of Steven Spielberg, but every couple of years, a new Martin Scorsese film is coming out, and the way that these films are made, a lot of them especially, he's made those big, sprawling epics that really take a big-time editor to help him put them together. I really don't know how his films don't win Best Editing at the Academy Awards. If they're in the competition, they have to win. Like, The Wolf of Wall Street didn't win Best Editing, which makes absolutely no sense. Anytime you have to go through time like that, you probably are just, I would lose my mind with the amount of footage I would have to edit together. I couldn't do it. And I love editing, but there is just so much there. That's why a lot of times you might see 2 editors working on a film. His editing is something that just does not get appreciated. I mean, he just knows how to put great needle drops in all his films. They always look great. They always have a great theme and message to them. Sometimes that theme doesn't get taken for what it is. Unfortunately, people misread films. I'm looking at you, Goodfellas. But you know what? Martin Scorsese knows what he's going for. The film fans out there know what he's going for. And without further ado, let's count this down from 10 to 1, the top 10 Martin Scorsese films of all time. And just remember that this is my opinion. It might not look the same as your list, and I actually want to hear what your guys' top 10 lists of all time are down in the comments section below, because you know what? Everybody has different favorite Martin Scorsese films. I tried to take into account, though, how culturally significant each of these films are, as well as my love for them. So even though a film that I personally might put a little bit higher, I had to be a little bit honest with myself, like, this film is a little bit more important than I'm giving it credit for, just because I love this film more. Doesn't mean it's culturally significant, but there's a bunch of different factors that went into this top 10 list. And at number 10, I have 2010's Shudder Island. And this just showed that Martin Scorsese can do a little bit of horror. He never really dabbled in this too much. There's really just this and Cape Fear. Both of them kind of paying homage to one of his favorite directors, Alfred Hitchcock. Cape Fear was definitely wearing it a little bit more on his shoulder with a bunch of the Dutch angles and a bunch of the close-ups that he would do in Alfred Hitchcock in a lot of his films, including in Psycho. And you could just see the inspiration there. But this movie is another one, a mystery film. We're trying to figure out what is going on. Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo play 2 U.S. Marshals. They go to an island. They're trying to figure out a mystery about what is going on. And we start to see Teddy, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, unravel as this movie's going on. We start to realize that there's a lot more about this person that we don't know. And it builds up to a fantastic conclusion, a conclusion that me and my wife still argue about to this day. We're trying to figure out what the truth is in this story. And I don't want to spoil this movie because this one's one of his newer films on this list, and I feel like a lot of people haven't seen it. I mean, I know a lot of people who have absolutely love this movie. It's very underappreciated. It is shot gorgeously. One of the better looking Martin Scorsese Scorsese films. This is right up there. I mean, like, I know a lot of people don't like the look of Hugo, but it personally really works for me. And I think this is kind of like a step back from that, but it really works. You know, we get the really bright white lights. It's kind of overexposed a little bit, but it doesn't look ugly. Like, this is why you bring in Martin Scorsese and a great cinematographer, because this movie, one thing I can absolutely say about it, is beautiful. And if you don't really care too much about the story, and I don't know why you wouldn't, because it is a phenomenal story, and the plot just builds and builds and builds as you unravel this mystery. And it just has such a satisfying ending. And of course, Leonardo DiCaprio, one of Martin Scorsese's biggest collaborators. Him and Robert De Niro are the two big ones who have always worked with Martin Scorsese. And I really felt like this is one of the better Leo performances. When Leo and Martin Scorsese first got together, I really felt like at the beginning, they really didn't have that magic yet. It really wasn't until they got to The Departed. The Aviator and Gangs of New York, I felt like Leo was just kind of miscast in both of those movies. I mean, he does a better job in The Aviator than the Gangs of New York. I feel like Gangs of New York, so you won't see this on this top 10 list, is really just a showpiece for Daniel Day-Lewis and just some great production work. But other than that, the story, Cameron Diaz, just doesn't work for me. But I know a lot of people love Gangs of New York, so just warning you guys now, not going to make this list. And at number 9, we get 1980's Raging Bull. And this one, Robert De Niro, Best Actor, well deserved. Now this film, the reason why it's so low, a lot of people will argue that this is Martin Scorsese's best film. It is one of the best made films ever. Looks gorgeous with the black and white. Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro giving world-class performance. Mainly Robert De Niro. What he put his body through with gaining and losing weight and just being this abusive man, but yet somebody who we kind of understand, but yet he's still a horrible person. But the way Robert De Niro portrays that is absolutely astonishing in this film. The only thing about this movie is because it's such a dark tale and it really doesn't have a happy ending at all. It's just that it's one that's really, really, really hard to come back to, and one that's hard to revisit. The Criterion Collection put out a beautiful 4K, and you can appreciate the filmmaking. All of the boxing scenes are some of the best boxing scenes you've ever seen in film. All of them look different from each other. I just love that they really wanted to show you what Robert De Niro's thinking, and the boxing scenes are a great way to illustrate that. Robert De Niro crying in that prison cell is just absolutely brutal. I mean, this is a film you have to see at least once, but I can promise you it's probably not one you're going to want to run back to and revisit. This does not have the fun of a lot of other sports movies. This is not Rocky. It's not even Martin Scorsese's The Color of Money. This is a depressing tale, but it's one you should see just from a filmmaking standpoint, and that's why it's my number 9. And at number 8, I got The King of Comedy, again starring Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis. This one actually really hurt Martin Scorsese. It really just illustrated what the 80s were to him. The 80s for me, for Martin Scorsese, he put out a lot of great films, but he had a real hard time. A lot of his movies weren't well received, like the 1970s and what he would get in the 1990s. Entertainment Tonight even said that the biggest miss of 1982 was The King of Comedy. Looking back on it now, though, a lot of us have agreed that this was a film that was ahead of its time, talking about fame and what people will do for it and how their minds just get misconstrued. Robert De Niro is haunting in this movie, yet he's very funny as well. Jerry Lewis is amazing in this movie playing against him. I never really saw Jerry Lewis do work like this, and I absolutely love it. And honestly, this movie, just like Taxi Driver, really influenced the Joker movie that came out a few years ago starring Joaquin Phoenix. That movie is like really just a real hard combination of both this movie and Taxi Driver, and The King of Comedy is one. I also absolutely love the ending of this movie. It really leaves you thinking. Again, New York City looks just absolutely gorgeous. 1980s New York City is something, anytime you go to that setting, that's an extra point for me just because I absolutely love the look of it. And Robert De Niro turning out another great performance. Who do you guys think is better, Robert De Niro or Leonardo DiCaprio working with Martin Scorsese? I feel like it depends on your age, because for me, it is still Robert De Niro, even though I love Leonardo DiCaprio and I grew up with Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese movies. But when I go back, anything with De Niro is just incredible. And both of these actors, Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, are always turning out great performances. Like I said, Gangs of New York and The Aviator might be a little bit of a step down for Leonardo DiCaprio, but it's hard for me to pick a bad Robert De Niro performance, so I'm going to give the slight edge personally to Robert De Niro. And then at number 7, this might seem a little low for some of you guys, I got 2006's The Departed. And this one finally earned Martin Scorsese the Best Director award that he had been chasing forever, the Best Picture winner that year. This movie at the time was just a smash hit, and I'll be honest with you guys, when I saw this in theaters, I didn't love it. Now, I did see it the day that my dog passed away, and I was just trying to cheer. Me and my stepdad went to the theater to just try and cheer ourselves up. So that probably left a bad taste in my mouth. So I didn't see it for like a couple more years after this. And I was like, well, I was way off. This might be Marty's best movie. Now, I've kind of come down a little bit since then. I still revisit this one every year or two. I absolutely love it. It's, again, one of those sprawling crime epics that Martin Scorsese likes to tell. Kind of in line with movies like Goodfellas, Casino, and then obviously The Wolf of Wall Street. But this one at the time was just a mega hit, and I think that Leonardo DiCaprio, this is his first best performance with Martin Scorsese, but of course he gets outshined by Matt Damon. Matt Damon is incredible in this movie. He just plays somebody who you absolutely hate. You want to see him fail. And every single which way you look, he somehow still comes out on top until the very end, spoiler alert, when he doesn't, because Mark Wahlberg sneaks up and just blows his brains out. And I do love the ending of this movie, except for that rat. I get it. I understand why people complain about it. That's what I mean about beating the message over the head. When I complain about that in certain things, that's it. I mean, I'm like, we got it. I know it's a wrap, but I'm not going to sit here and knock Martin Scorsese. It's Martin Scorsese. But yeah, that is a flaw in the film. Jack Nicholson, huge Jack Nicholson fan. He's overacting his ass off in this movie, but I love overacting Jack. He looks like he's having the time of his life, and I just enjoy his performance. Alec Baldwin, I think, is actually kind of miscast this movie. Him trying to do a Boston accent is just a little bit silly. Mark Wahlberg is doing a good job in this movie as the angry Boston guy. He's always good for it. Why not have him in here? The movie itself also features some great needle drops. I'm not a big sex scene guy, but one of my favorite sex scenes in film history is Leonardo DiCaprio and Vera Farmiga having sex with Comfortably Numb playing in the background. I mean, that scene is just so well shot. This movie, again, like most of his movies, is so well shot, but it's actually not my favorite one of his movies when it comes to visuals. It looks good. It's of its time, though. I really feel like you could pinpoint that's a mid-2000s film, and I've just never been a huge fan of the look, I would say like the 03 to 09 look of films. You know, you could look at it on the screen, you'll know, okay, I know exactly the era when that came out. And it just doesn't always work for me. So for me, even though I think that Martin Scorsese made the best of this, it's just not one of my favorite shot of his films. But it is still a phenomenal film. And then at number 6, I actually have a review for the 4K, a beautiful Criterion 4K here on the channel that came out earlier this year. After Hours. This one has really developed quite a cult following over the years. At the time, this movie was not very well received, but as years have gone on, people have looked at this as a fantastic dark comedy. Just a very simple tale of a man who wants to just have a good night. Unfortunately, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong, and everything for this guy goes wrong that night. But you get such a great ensemble cast featuring Catherine O'Hara and John Hurd, which I always think is absolutely funny that you get the parents from Home Alone in this movie years before Home Alone. But for me, what really sells this is the 1980s New York City nightlife. Like I said, I'm from New York. I've seen it. I haven't never seen New York like this, but I could just imagine it, and it just looks absolutely scary and petrifying. And it's just amazing what this guy has to go through. What Griffin Dunn has happened to him, any person would lose their mind if every single thing that could go wrong goes wrong.
That's because they're the same person. They're both dead. I couldn't believe that.
And his movie is just absolutely funny. Yeah, I mean, it's dark. It's very, very dark in this. Let me just get that straight. You have to have a dark sense of humor to appreciate this movie. But if you do, you absolutely love this movie. And I'm really glad to see that this movie is actually finally getting the fandom that it deserves. And in number 5, I got The Color of Money. I know this is probably where I'll lose some of you guys, because I know a lot of people don't love this movie, but this would actually be higher on my personal list. But I know that this movie isn't that culturally significant, other than winning Paul Newman his first Academy Award, which is absolutely insane. This came out the same year as Top Gun, so you have Tom Cruise just firing on all cylinders that year, and he turns out a great dramatic performance, very different from his Top Gun performance, except for the fact that it's cocky Tom Cruise, and everyone loves cocky Tom Cruise, who needs to learn himself a lesson. But Paul Newman steals the show.
I'm back.
This is the sequel to The Hustler, and we really get to see Fast Eddie Phelps and how his life has gone since The Hustler, and I just absolutely love it. And what gets me for this movie is the music. All the song choices in this movie work for me. I go back and watch the opening scene in the bar with John Turturro and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonia working with Paul Newman, and you get the Genesis song playing in the background. I go back and watch that all the time. It's one of my favorite scenes in a movie, and I don't know why. It's just a very simple scene, but I just love the close-ups and the zoom-outs, the zoom-ins on the pool tables. As the movie goes on, it feels cold outside, builds up to a good conclusion. Tom Cruise and Paul Newman have great chemistry. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonia is just always phenomenal. You even get a young Forrest Whitaker in this movie. And it's a sports movie, so you know what it's building up towards. And if you love sports movies, this is probably Martin Scorsese's best sports movie, even better than Raging Bull, because Raging Bull, like I said, doesn't have a lot of the sports movie tropes, but this does, and if you can appreciate that, you'll love The Color of Money. And at number 4, we got Taxi Driver. This movie stars Robert De Niro as Travis Bickle, and this movie is just a great character study and also a good character study of the 1970s New York world. How a taxi driver can just live in this world, be in his own world, and everybody else is in their own worlds, only worrying about themselves. But Travis Bickle, he's got something going on upstairs. Not everything is clicking. He doesn't like how the world is heading. He wants to intervene. He's a former Marine, so he saw a lot of stuff in Vietnam, and that's just weighing down his mind. And he wants to live a normal life, but he can't. That's why he becomes a taxi driver at night, because he can't sleep. He has no way to live his normal life, and this is the only way that can really just help him live, or else he'll snap. And luckily, because he was about to make a huge mistake, he's able to redirect his energy into a positive manner. But at the end of this movie, we have to wonder, is that going to last? And having Paul Schrader do the script, and Paul Schrader, he loves to make movies, very depressing movies. He likes to make movies about men and what they're dealing with in their own mind. And this combined with Martin Scorsese and a phenomenal score just came out with one of the greatest movies that we've ever had. Surprisingly, for a dark tale like this, it's very easy to revisit. I don't know why, but I could revisit this movie every single year. You get a young Jodie Foster in here showing us, yeah, she is going to be one of our greats as time goes on. She turns out a good performance here. I think she was only 14 years old. And man, just what a phenomenal film. If you haven't seen Taxi Driver, I can highly recommend it. And at number 3, I got The Wolf of Wall Street from 2013. And this movie has gone up and up my list every time I rewatch it. If you would have asked me when it first came out, I would have said, oh, that was really good, but it's very similar to Goodfellas and Casino, and I think Goodfellas and Casino are better films. And I just feel like this one is just kind of doing the same thing, but it is a Long Island tale. I am a Long Islander. Jordan Belfort, that all took place again, New York tale, so it very much speaks to me. Leonardo DiCaprio just turns out a hysterical performance. This is, again, a very dark comedy, but a very funny movie. And you bring in Jonah Hill, who I think took scale for this movie, which is only about $500,000. And he turns out a great performance as well. Has one of my biggest laughs in this movie.
Oh, yeah, everything's fine. Hey, listen, I quit.
It's just absolutely one of the funniest and most New York things you could ever hear. Leonardo DiCaprio, though, really is the star of this movie, as we see Jordan Belfort go from this innocent and naive kid all the way up to this selfish piece of shit drug addict who doesn't give a fuck about anyone else but himself. And you get all that in this movie. Margot Robbie, her first movie, or at least her first American movie, she does a phenomenal job, and she's just absolutely gorgeous. Put herself right on the map. And Margot Robbie, again, one of our greatest working actresses today. 10 years ago, though, she turned out another phenomenal performance. But I mean, all the supporting actors in this movie do a great job. All the people working under Leo are hysterical. You get great directors doing acting roles in here, like Jon Favreau and Rob Reiner. All of them having a good time, chewing scenery. Everyone's having a blast. It's a lot of fun, but again, a cautionary tale, because again, these people do not win in the end of the day. I mean, Jordan Belfort, I think in real life only got 3 years in prison, so for all the people he fucked over to only get 3 years in prison is pretty messed up, while somebody who will do cocaine will get like 3 years in prison, and the only people they're hurting is themselves. But this guy was able to ruin so many people's lives, and he only gets 3 years in prison. Yeah, that does suck, but it does show you that at the end of the day, at least he got caught. So at least we know all the stuff, because people will watch this movie and go, I want that life. You do not want that life. You don't want to build a life where you hurt other people to get what you want. That is never the right thing to do. And I think that's what this movie is trying to show you. So definitely check out The Wolf of Wall Street. And then at number 2, I got Casino. Another one of those sprawling epics, a crime epic. This time we're following around Robert De Niro's Ace Rothstein. And I absolutely love this movie. I go back and forth with my number 1, if this is it, or if my number 1 is my number 1. But I am a huge fan of Vegas. I always loved going to Vegas. I actually even lived in Vegas at one point in my life, and just seeing those casinos, and it's just so funny because I just have so much people in my family who love Vegas, and I know a lot about Vegas and the casino industry. So just seeing it all on the screen like that, it really does speak to me. And again, we're talking about a crime mob movie. We bring in Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci again playing that scary fucking guy who you just don't want to mess around with.
You took your boots off, you put your feet on the table, you shit-kicking, stinky horse smelling motherfucker, you.
And the way this movie is shot is what really does it for me. I think that they really turned up the cinematography. I think about the shot of that Cadillac pulling up in the airport into that one white spotlight all the time. Some great needle drop. That's what Martin Scorsese loves to do with a lot of his movies, and you get plenty of them in here. Good montages. But I think what adds to this movie is Sharon Stone. She does a great job as this woman. She's kind of a gold digger, but she's also misguided. You know, she doesn't really understand. Her life was very hard. Ace Rothstein is not a great husband at the end of the day. He thinks that his money is enough for him to do whatever the hell he wants. So she's just, you know, even though she isn't a good woman herself, their poor kid, my God, she never had a chance. But the two of them, you know, they're fighting with each other. I've seen this in my own personal life, you know, where the husband and wife call the cops on each other. The wife smashed her car into her husband's car. She wants the money. You know, that classic tale. But it just does such a good job. And again, a cautionary tale that doesn't have a happy ending like you might think. But dealing with sports gambling, again, we love sports gambling now in 2023, so this movie might have been a little bit ahead of its time, and Robert De Niro was starring in this and Heat in the very same year. So if by some miracle you haven't seen Casino, you owe it to yourself. The first time I saw this movie, I started about halfway on HBO Max, and I was like, well, I guess at the time it was just regular old HBO. I started it because it was halfway through at the time. You know, you couldn't just start from the beginning. And I was like, holy shit, this movie is amazing. And then I had to rewatch it again, and I've rewatched it again every single year. And again, I go back and forth with this or my number one. And I'm sure at this point you figured it out. My number one is Goodfellas. How can it not be 1990s Goodfellas? This is one of the greatest films of all time. It might be the best made film of all time. Adam McKay said every time before he makes a movie, he watches Goodfellas every single day because that is what a great movie is. And Goodfellas, it just does it all. A sprawling epic, great licensed tracks, great montages, great acting. I mean, Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci winning an Academy Award. Tommy is one of the scariest movie characters of all time, but when you look at him, you're not scared of him. But then once you get to know him, Spider got to know him, and Spider ain't walking around anymore. So this movie is just phenomenal. I mean, it's, again, so well shot. I do not know how they edited this thing together. It must have been a fucking miracle. The fact this didn't win Best Picture over Dances with Wolves blows my mind. I get it. You know, this is kind of something that a lot of people at the time especially thought that they were glorifying the gangster life. But really, the whole third act of this movie is the downfall of Ray Liotta's character. And that scene, that entire third act, will give you anxiety. I mean, my God, you just know what's coming. But just because he's all coked up, Ray Liotta, the way that Martin Scorsese shoots that, it feels very kinetic, like you're on coke. And that's what they're going for, is that whole entire feeling to give you the anxiety that Ray Liotta is feeling. And then, of course, they end up getting caught in the end, and we get that phenomenal ending. I love it when Ray Liotta stands up from that witness stand and starts talking to us in the fourth wall.
Didn't matter. Didn't mean anything. When I was broke, I would go out and rob some more.
Everyone else's pause. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, in a movie filled with amazing scenes. I quote this movie all the time. I'm gonna get the papers, get the papers. The amount of times I say that, just completely out of context, just because it's in my mind at all times. There's so much about this movie that always crosses my mind. I feel it's a kind of a Christmas movie because there's one Christmas scene in it. I want to go to these restaurants. As a New Yorker, I just absolutely love looking at this film. So for me, Goodfellas will always be number one. It is one of my favorite films to ever exist. I still cannot believe that this movie even exists. It's that good. And you can see that movies like Boogie Nights, another movie that I really love, took so much inspiration from this and Casino. And yeah, I know my top three films are like those sprawling epics that he loves to do, but nobody does those kind of films like Martin Scorsese. And I have to go with my heart on those, and those for me are the top three, and Goodfellas is absolutely number one. I had two honorable mentions, and they were Hugo and Cape Fear. Those just missed the cut, and I just couldn't put them up there because they're just not that well loved like some of his other movies. Even if I really enjoy those movies, I don't think they're his best films, but they're still really good. So if you haven't seen Hugo or Cape Fear, the remake of the Robert Mitchum version of Cape Fear, that one is also really good. Robert De Niro turns out a phenomenal performance in that, and also led to one of the best Simpsons episodes that you'll ever see. Cape Fear definitely deserves a little bit more credit than it's got, and I have a good review up on the channel for Hugo, so if you're interested in that 4K Blu-ray, there is a review on the channel for that. But before we get out of here today, guys, it is Friday, and that means it's time for our digital code giveaway. Every single video that we put out on Friday, I will ask you guys a digital code giveaway question. Actually, I'm going to ask you guys two digital code giveaway questions. All you have to do is answer one of those in the comment section below. And as long as you do that, you come back to Monday's video and we put your name on a magic wheel. We spin that wheel 2 times, and the 2 names it lands on, they have their choice of the digital codes that you've seen on your screen before you today. And you know what? We're talking Martin Scorsese, and I have to know, What are your favorite Martin Scorsese films? Let me know in the comments section below. And Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the big actors who works with Martin Scorsese. He's worked with him numerous times. I want to know, what is your favorite Leonardo DiCaprio film? Leave that in the comments section below. All you guys got to do is answer one of those, and then just don't forget to come back to Monday's video to see if you are a lucky winner. And if you guys want to continue to support this channel, nothing supports this channel out more than by you just simply liking this video, subscribing to the channel, getting out in those streets, and telling your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.